Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Why don't you come on in here and sit down with me? This is your home for organic Bible study that's fresh and delicious, right here on Daily Dose Radio. Today we are looking at Psalm 5, and we're going to look at verses 4 and 5. And it might seem like that these verses kind of strip the gears in the conversation because we were having a really pleasant conversation about prayer. Remember? The single simplest elements of prayer are your words to his ears. That's it. And then the question is, to whose ears? And he emphasizes that over and over again. It's the Lord himself. So it's not to any other God, but to him. So my words to his ears, and his ears belong to the Lord God who made heaven and earth, one revealed in the Holy Bible. Now, as I said, it's almost like stripping gears because then we come to, and then of course we also had verse 3 where he talked about the time of praying would be, it's really good to pray in the mornings. And then we come to verse 4 and it's like, wait a minute, what are we talking about now? So let's read verses 4 and 5. That's our text today. And then I'll make my comments here. For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hatest all workers of iniquity. So that's verses 4 and 5. You do not take pleasure in wickedness, or thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness. So, as I said, we've identified the basic elements of prayer, my words to his ears, but who is he? Well, that's what the psalmist tells us now. It tells us who he is, and it also tells us something about us. Thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee. So, how is it that I am able to come in his presence? Especially when he says there in verse 5, the foolish shall not stand in thy sight. So, if I'm a man who is corrupted by sin, and I make foolish decisions and I make corrupt decisions all the time, how is it that I can pray? Because you see, this tells us about his condition, which is holiness. It also tells me about my condition, which is corruption. For you do not take pleasure in wickedness, evil does not abide with you. It's my translation. There in verse 5, the foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Remember, in Psalm 1, first 3 verses were about the blessed man who meditates on the law of the Lord, delights in it. And then verses 4 and 5 are about the wicked or the ungodly. And it says there that he's not going to stand in the congregation of the righteous. We have no standing before God because of our sin. And yet, the psalmist tells us there in the first 3 verses that we come before him like our king. So how do we attain standing before him when we have no standing before him because of our sin? He's holy, we're not. Our condition is corrupt. Remember what the Bible teaches in the Psalms and in the New Testament. There is none righteous, no, not one. And it also tells us in Romans chapter 3 that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So we know that what he's talking about here is me, is us, is humans. We fall short because of our sin, and yet he wants to hear our prayer. How does that happen? Well, we're going to find out tomorrow as we look at verses 6 and 7. 6 ends this little section about our condition and God's condition. His condition is holiness. Our condition is not. Our condition is wickedness, evil, foolishness, iniquity, falsehood, this is verse 6, bloodiness, and deceit. All of those things the Lord abhors that because he can't stand for it to be in his presence. But something has happened that allows us to engage in prayer and find standing in his presence. All right, well, join me tomorrow, and we'll explore that together here on Daily Dose Radio.